Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure. We are a weekly podcast focusing on the paranormal, the supernatural, and the metaphysical. Join us for thought-provoking discussions on paranormal phenomena, conspiracies, and all things unexplained as we talk to researchers and investigators about ghosts and hauntings, UFOs and aliens, urban legends, cryptids, and so much more. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and follow to receive notifications when new content is made available. You can also visit us at www.paranormallypodcast.com for more content and information, including all our social links. I thank you again for watching and or listening, and we hope to see you for the next episode of Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure. So grab yourself a drink and a snack, turn the lights off on the way back, find yourself a nice comfy spot, and enjoy this episode of Paranomaly. Stay with us, folks. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. We have a great guest tonight, Gloria Hass. She's a multidimensional contactee. She's an author, a healer, a visionary starseed. Gloria, thank you so much for joining us and to be able to tell your story. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you, Todd and Jim, for having me here. I was the youngest child of two, and I grew up in the desert in California, and that's where a lot of interesting things began. But we also lived in the Los Angeles area, and it was really strange how my mom and dad had moved us there, and it was where we didn't really know any family. And because of that, my parents just thought I sometimes had an overactive imagination.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And also, I'm also a intuitive reader. I do intuitive readings for people. And also I've worked with some people in the secret space programs, helping them find out what they did in the programs. As well as an author, I've written nonfiction and fiction books over the span of my writing career from the last 30 years. I've published 30 to 35 books. And right now I'm currently working on a crime fiction book about a visionary who is able to help solve crimes.
Very interesting. Before we move into your story, how do you help people discover people who think that they may have been in the secret space program or may have suppressed memories of some kind? What is your methodology? I'm just interested in that personally because I know a lot of people and I'm running into a lot of people who have very vivid dreams, which may not be dreams. What's your methodology for discovering and validating someone's SSP or possible SSP experiences?
What I do is I ask them to write a question, questions down of anything that they want to know. And then I was born with this intuition to where I have visions, I have dreams, I hear things, smell, I can hear people talking, or I can see different things that are happening. And recently I did a reading for Brian Singh, who has no memories, but he realized he has an innate knowing of things that resonate. And I saw him as a child, what they did with him running through the labs. And what happens is I can start seeing these things, and I will go into a meditative state during the day and say, what would you like for me to know? And then at night, before I go to sleep, I said, please bring forth what I need to know while I'm sleeping. And that's when I get a lot of my visions, is when I'm in a meditative state or I'm sleeping. I see these things happening, and I will wake up and take notes. And then I can go back to sleep, and either I will sleep without remembering anything, or I will have more. And then also throughout the day, I will see things, or it's like watching a movie. I can see somebody being strapped down with doctors, in lab coats. And then also I can hear, like in Brian's case, I heard his voice, him speaking to someone. And I remember with my eyes open, I was getting up to make some food, and I saw him standing in front of a jet. So I see these different things, and he has confirmed what I've seen also coincides with some other readings that he has had.
Interesting. And we won't linger here too long, but just want to get into the nitty gritty a little bit on the visionary experiences you have. So I have meditative visions too, but with mine, I never have the sense that what I'm seeing is really representative of, or let's say, it never feels to me like it's the reality of what happened. It always seems to me, even though it's in high definition, maybe, and it's not symbols or anything. There are real people, and it seems like a real environment. But nevertheless, it always seems to me that that's more symbolically representative of something that happened. Do you not feel that way about your own meditative visions in that regard? Do you feel like you're actually seeing like the actual lab that Brian Singh was running around in or whatever? Or do you feel like you're getting more of a symbolic scene or something that tells you that's giving you information that's basically just saying Brian Singh, was, in some kind of underground facility? Or are you actually seeing the actual scene itself as it happened in his
I'm seeing the actual scene as it happened.
Okay, very interesting. Okay.
I've even helped work with the police, and they needed to know how someone died. And I told them who killed him, what method they were using, and where they were. I said it's where they practice throwing axes. I didn't know where that was, but I knew what they did with the personal effects of the person they had killed. Only where what woods, I don't know. There are bears. Well, we have bears all over, so they would have to follow the man to find out what happened. But I had seen all of that, like it was happening, and I even heard conversations between the two people on how they were going to kill and why they were. So I actually pick up the actual happening.
Wow. And you have and you have in some cases been able to validate, like have you seen a place in a vision and then later on have gone to that place and saw that, oh, that was exactly, what I saw in my vision? You've had
Actually,
validation.
when working with the police, they have sent pictures, and I have described to them, and they would tell me where in the case it related. So everything that I have knowledge of, which is quite a bit of it, has not been released to the public.
Interesting. Okay, so let's delve into your childhood experiences. And like I said, backstage, just give us the first person account as best as you can. Take us there as best as you can. Full resolution detail. Let's start out with the first unusual experience that was ET related, and start there. And
Okay, it was, I was living in Quartz Hill, California, and I only lived like 2 houses down from not even a quarter of a block from the park, and which was helpful to live there, to be able to go have fun. But we're talking about country blocks. We're not talking about city blocks. So they were pretty long streets between the blocks. And I remember one day my dad and my brother were gone, and I looked at my mom and I was bored. I was probably driving her nuts, and she's standing in the kitchen probably washing dishes or preparing food. I don't know. But I was, and she said, Gloria, why don't you go and see if your friend, I'll call her TZ, if she can go ahead, if she can play. So I went to pick up the phone, and my mom said, no, go to her house. My mom just wanted to get me out of there so she probably could have some peace and quiet. And I was probably like 9 years old, 9 or 10, probably at that point. So I walked down and went to her house and asked her mom if she could play. And her mom called. This is when moms called each other and verified. And she said, okay, Gloria's mom said that, it's okay, and we guys can go to the park. Well, as we're approaching, at the time, there was like the house, and then there was a field. Now it has homes in it. And then there was our house. And you could fit 2 houses in that field. It tells you how large it was. Excuse me. So we get to the couple of houses down from the field, and TZ said, Gloria, do you see that? And I'm just talking away, like, what are you talking about? See what? And she goes, there on the ground. I'm like, where? And she's pointing right there. And we could see what looked like a horse laying on its side. And she said, I wonder if that's Nikki's horse. I said, well, I don't one of the horses, because we had a neighbor across the street who owned horses. I said, sure looks like it would be a quarter horse. And so we started walking up to it slowly, and we got within a few feet of it, and we could see that it wasn't breathing, and we walked up basically to it, and it was a half a horse sliced from right down here this way in half,
like a gory type of scene, like it was severed off, blood and stuff.
There was blood around it on the ground, and TZ's freaking out, and I'm thinking, wow, this is really cool. I liked some morbid stuff when I was a child. So she said, what do we do? And I said, go home and get your mom, and I'll go home and get mine. So she ran down the street, and I went in to get my mom, and we're saying, Mom, there's a dead horse on the side of the street. And she looked at me and she said, really? So by the time that my mom was coming out, and TZ came with her mom, the horse was gone, but there was an outline of the horse in blood on the ground.
Now, is that improbable that it could have disappeared? How much time had passed since you left the horse and got back to the horse? Was that in and of itself anomalous, the fact that it's just suddenly gone entirely?
Yes, because it couldn't have gotten up. It only had 2 legs, and it was
right, and no one could have.
No, it was maybe 3 minutes.
Oh, only 3 minutes.
About 3 to 5 minutes. So it would not have been enough time for it to have happened, for somebody to have come and gotten the horse.
Right, but there was still blood there, right?
Yes, and it was like coagulated, almost dried blood. And our moms thought that we were playing that prank. And I said, how can we have done that when I said, Mom, I didn't leave the house with anything. And TZ goes, I didn't carry anything. So they thought that we had played a prank. Maybe how are we going to get a hold of red paint or a food dye with that magnitude? We couldn't have.
Right. Okay, go on from there.
And then TZ went home with her mom and got put on a restriction. And my mom looked at me and said, this is one of the worst pranks you've ever done. I'm going in the house. I want time to cool off, and then, come in a few minutes. So I was in trouble. Or actually, I was waiting after my mom went in. I was standing there, and I felt like I was being watched. And they're above there are trees at the house, at the one house before the field, and they were very tall trees, and probably 15, 20 feet high, if that, I don't know. And I looked up, and I saw the underside of a spaceship, of a silver spaceship, and I said out loud, "What did this horse ever do to you to deserve this?"
Now, you were around 8 or 9 years old. Did you recognize it right away as a spacecraft, some type of
Mhm.
vehicle?
Yeah,
And how high was it, roughly?
probably about 15 to 20 feet above me.
Hmm. And you immediately also connected it with the horse incident. You felt it
Yes, I did.
intuitively or just circumstantially? I mean, because that had just happened and that's there, or why did you think that uh, that it
It,
was resulting from the crash?
Intuitively, to me, it seemed normal
Uh,
that they would have done that. It was just like, what did you do? What did the horse do for
mhm.
this to happen? And, for all of that to transpire. It was just an intuitive, it was like, why did you do this?
So, Gloria, let me ask you this question. How old was you when this happened?
About 9 or 10.
9 or 10. Can you tell me, have you had any kind of paranormal experiences before this? Or is this something that just happened?
This was something that just happened
Okay.
because
And that was the first anomalous thing that ever happened. Nothing up until that you consciously recall up until this event.
exactly.
Hmm. That's an odd first thing. Um, and so there was a telepathic message, you said.
I said it out loud to them, and I felt like, I was being watched, and I looked up and I saw the spaceship, and
Oh,
then
so
I looked.
they did not say to you, look up. I thought
If
you
they
in it.
did, I didn't hear it. I
Okay.
just felt that I was being watched and that I needed to look up.
Okay.
So they may have told me that into my subconscious, look up something that I didn't actually telepathically hear.
Uh-huh. Uh, Now, did anyone in the neighborhood find themselves missing a horse?
No, because my mom told my dad. My dad went across the street and spoke with Nikki's father. He went outside and said all the horses were accounted for.
Hmm.
And they were the only one on our block that had horses.
Strange. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Any additional things that happened in the wake of that, or is that isolated from your later contact experiences, which we'll go into next?
That was the only thing that happened after that was my experiences with the malevolent little green men, and that was in my room. But up until after that point, the only thing other than, the horse being gone, and I looked down at the ground, looked back up, the spaceship was gone. And my parents laughed at me like, you've seen what? I said, it was like a flying saucer. And my dad said, you're watching too many of those, B-rated movies on TV, the old black and whites.
Mm-hmm.
That's all we had were black and white TV then.
Mm-hmm. So your parents never had any experiences, or that they admitted to you at least, or consciously recalled. They weren't experiencers themselves, or at least to your recollection. They had never said anything.
No, my
Mm-hmm.
dad didn't, and mom didn't believe in it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, let's come to your contact experiences then. And I think these are interesting because I can't say I've ever heard of this particular species. I think that this is, I mean, maybe it's not totally unique, but it seems somewhat rare compared to the normal creatures that contactees and abductees have interactions with. And so how much time, what age were you when these contact experiences started?
Probably around the same age as with I had seen the flying saucer.
Okay, go ahead and take us through those.
Well, I know that my brother liked to watch Frankenstein and Abbott and Costello meets Frankenstein and Dracula movies and
Mhm.
all of that. And my parents just thought I was being impressionable. So, and those movies were normal with my growing up at the time, because that's all basically that was on TV besides, Father Knows Best, Leave It to
Mhm.
Beaver, that sort of type of programming.
Mhm.
And I remember one night I was sleeping and I felt my bed moving or being, somebody shaking it or my bed moving. And I woke up and the lights off. And because I would go to sleep after that with my parents would watch TV and my bedroom was here. And you walk out my bedroom door and you're in the living room. So any light that was on in the living room, I could see in my bedroom. At that point, everything was dark, and the TV was off. So I knew my parents were asleep.
Mhm.
And so I saw these little green men with these really long fingernails. And they were long and pointy. And it reminds me of like scissor hands. Even though his hands were scissors, but the length of their nails were about that long, and they
Mhm.
were very sharp.
Yeah.
And
So when I first heard you say that, I have heard, and I don't know if you've heard, of other people seeing beings with those same kind of fingernails. I have not heard of beings that small. You reckon they were what, smaller than the small grays, almost 2 to 3 feet, very, very small
Mhm.
beings, right? I have heard, I'm pretty sure about, and this isn't the typical reptilian, but some reptilians that people have encountered had fingernails like that were implausibly long, and almost like, I think people have said that, yeah, it almost seemed like Edward Scissorhands, kind of like fingers or nails. But these were not reptilians. These did they seem reptile at all? Or we'll go into the full description. So they're about 2 to 3 feet tall,
And
smaller than the small grays.
they're green, and they had very hideous face with really weird looking teeth. So if they're reptilians or a species of reptilians that who that may have been experienced, by other people. I don't know, but they, could have been a shorter version, a younger version of before
Mhm.
they grew up. I don't know.
Hmm. Mhm.
And they would jeer and poke me in the legs with their nails, and would move my bed halfway across the room.
In what manner did they do that? Kind of in a mischievous manner, or were they truly violent about it, or uh, what did it seem like to you as far as their demeanor and the force that they used, or uh, they were jabbing their nails into you?
Like you do when you taunt someone.
Uh huh.
You're very taunting towards them. You hit somebody, and it's almost like a gang. You're being ganged up on by a group, and then they would shake the bed. They would laugh, and I would.
Are they communicating to you simultaneously while doing this? Are they making any?
There, it was
There's no
almost
telepathy going on. Are
no,
they
no.
making any kind of vocalizations or anything during this?
I don't remember. I remember is the look on their faces, and they may have been laughing. Because to me it seemed like they were laughing. And I screamed for my mom, and she flipped the light on, and they were gone. And she was like, how did you get your bed here? Help me move it back. Well, Mom, if it's too heavy for you, it's going to be too heavy for me. So with both of us, we pushed it back. And I asked her, leave the light on, and what she did was she left the hall light on. And my parents just thought I was having repeated nightmares. So I had to stop watching the horror movies, but it still happened even without watching them.
Mm-hmm. So let's get back to the details of what they look like. So what did their eyes look like to you?
Bulging and round.
Larger, disproportionately large compared with
Mhm.
the head.
Yeah, really
Very
round and
bulging,
Yeah,
almost
very
a little bit.
bulging.
Todd, do you want to bring up our pictures while we do this? And bring up the mantid pictures first. You don't think these are the mantids, but I wanted to know if they perhaps the eyes at all resemble the mantid. The mantids do have these kind of really large, disproportionately large, bulging eyes. What was the shape of the head in general?
Long.
Like human shaped, ovular.
Yeah.
Large bulging, and the eyes were black.
No, they were. I don't remember. I probably almost. No, they weren't black like grays.
Mm-hmm.
They were not black at all. Almost.
Insect-like at all? Did they have an insect-like appearance?
No, not that I recall. No.
Mm-hmm. What about the nose and mouth?
It was like a similar mouth like we have, only, with really weird looking lips and really weird teeth that look just as green as their skin.
Mm-hmm.
And their nose looked like it was flattened against their face.
But some kind of protuberance for the nose,
Mm-hmm.
not just two holes like the gray.
No.
And so these were kind of more animated, compared to your small grays, which, everything is kind of static and still, you can't even, if you're in close contact with them, tell that they're breathing or anything. They're just, like static still. These were kind of more animal-like, did their facial expressions move around, or did their facial expressions change at all?
Yeah, they would laugh, look like someone's laughing, and most actually they just look like they were laughing, and no, the eyes
They
that you
don't
have
look.
are off to the side. Theirs was like ours, right on the front of their face.
Okay, so those were bifocal eyes. So that doesn't bear any resemblance to the mantid beings.
No,
Um,
those are good pictures, though.
yeah. Now, what about the bodies? Were the bodies slim and slender at all like the grays, or were they thicker? Were they muscular?
They were
Were they
thick.
wearing clothing?
They were not wearing clothing, and they were on the muscular side.
Interesting. So they're about 2 to 3 feet tall, and yet they're muscular. And they're wearing no clothing. Are their reproductive organs visible that you recall?
I only saw them from the waist up because they were standing around my bed.
Okay.
So I don't know if they had reproductive organs, and
Mhm.
if they did, I wouldn't know what it would be at that age. I
Mhm.
wasn't exposed to anything like that.
Mhm. Mhm. How many of them came into the room? Did they materialize into the room? Did they come through the wall like the grays, or did they come through the door? Or
They were just in my room and would wake me up.
you just woke up and they were already there?
Right, because they were shaking my bed and they were moving it. Similar to that picture, the eyes, but
This one right here.
that's on the screen. Yeah.
So did they have a vertical slit for a pupil?
I don't remember if they did or if they didn't, to be quite honest. I was focusing more on their body and their moving and just trying not to, trying to stay away from them. They may have been a smaller version of a reptilian.
Did the skin seem to have scales at all?
I don't remember.
Mm-hmm. What about teeth?
They
Sharp
had
teeth.
really large teeth.
they had very large teeth, canines type fang like teeth.
No, I didn't see any canines. It was
Mhm.
just like all large teeth, in the front of their face on both rows, up and
Mhm.
lower.
And so, what about this picture looks similar, or what is it that you thought resembled the creature?
Um, the face itself
Okay.
and the shape of the head reminds me of.
Mhm. Interesting. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't know who drew that picture or what they were, what their experiences were. Okay, so now, so one night they just show up. You wake up. They are already in your room, and are they just instantly on you right away, jabbing you and pestering you
Yeah,
in
because
in a taunting kind
they
of
woke
way?
me up. Yeah, they woke me up. I didn't just wake up. I was awakened in a
By them.
very rude fashion, and that's how they always. Um,
That's how they always. That's how that
yeah,
experience always went. They'd wake you up. Uh, were you paralyzed
no,
when you woke up?
no.
And did you think to run or anything? Or
I couldn't get off my bed. They were surrounding it.
okay,
I could not get off my bed at all. So all I did was scream for my mom.
and you were screaming
Oh,
loudly.
oh yeah, I woke them up, woke my dad and my mom both up.
Hmm.
My brother even mentioned it. He opened up his door. My mom said, "Go back to bed. Gloria's just having a nightmare."
So that's interesting. Really different kind of abduction methodology. Or was this not even really an abduction, or more of just harassment, more of an encounter slash harassment? Or did they? What proceeded from these experiences? They just came. Well, let's just start with a typical one, and then if there are different ones where they did take you, we'll get into those in a second. But so they come into your room and they're jabbing you. They're actually causing physical scratches, right? I think you said.
And puncture marks. My mom could see it and wondered what I got into to have my legs and arms scratched up. And I said, "It's those, the little green men with the long nails are coming in and hurting me." And
And were they somewhat covert about it, or how? I mean, you would think that if there was a bunch of them in there, all doing this, and that it would have created enough of a ruckus to where someone would have woken up. But do you think that they were like the Greys do, suppressing your family psionically or otherwise?
probably suppressing my family.
Right. Uh-huh.
And because they didn't hear anything going on, so they thought I was making it up to get attention.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so they would come in, they would taunt you and poke at you and scratch you. And then what? Would they leave at that point, or what proceeded after they did all the scratching and whatnot?
My mom would come in and turn the light on, and they were gone.
Hmm.
And that's what
As is,
happened
yeah,
each time.
and that is typical with abduction experiences. They're able to. Could you see them dematerialize, or were you able
What
to witness? Did
they
they?
were there in the dark, and when the light went on, they were completely gone. And I'm looking around, where did they go? And I even had my mom look under my bed because I
Mhm.
was afraid they may have gone under there, but there was nothing under my bed.
And how many times did this particular type of experience happen to you during those years?
Months, I would say months it happened. And I don't know how many months, but I didn't want to go to sleep at night.
How consistently for months? Every day for months, or every other day, or once a week,
I don't
or
know. I don't remember. I just know that it happened a lot,
frequently? Uh-huh.
frequently. Yeah. And I knew that if I fell asleep, and this is weird, if I fell asleep with my head at the foot of my bed, I didn't have experiences because my parents would come in and move me to with my head at the head of the bed. But if I fell asleep with my head on my pillow, that's when they came.
That is
So I
very
would sleep as much as possible with my head at the foot of my bed. And my mom said, "You're getting too heavy for your father." And my dad could move me without a problem, but he always left it for my mom to do. And she said, "You're getting too heavy for me to move you. You need to sleep with your head on your pillow." So I put my pillow at the foot of the bed. And I got in trouble for that. I did not want to lay down because I believed with my head at the foot of the bed right by the door that, you know, it didn't trigger for them to come.
Mm-hmm. Now, what do you think was the level of trauma of these experiences? But I think it's relevant to say here that you are also experiencing a lot of trauma just from your normal family.
Yeah.
And abuse and things. So in that context, was this extremely traumatic, or was it on par with, you know, the abuse coming from your parents at the time? Or how did this affect you during your childhood? Did everything change at this period of time? Were you, psychologically different post these experiences?
I became more withdrawn. I was scared of the dark, where I hadn't been afraid of the dark before then. And anything that went bump, even in my closet, if something moved, I would scream. So I became very sound sensitive to my surroundings and what was going on. And my dad would add insult to injury because he would come down the hallway and bang on the walls and everything. He also traumatized my brother in that instance. My brother wasn't having the visitations. And then my brother would even join in. And one night he was in my closet. My parents agreed for him to come out of the closet and scare me. He was wearing a sheet over him. And I just literally, I peed my pants. I was that afraid. And my mom said, "No more of this." And I was very nervous. And even my grandparents noticed, even for a visit, that I became a very nervous child. Even my great uncle noticed it. And my great grandmother did. So I changed completely. But I did get back at my brother with my parents' permission. If you'd like for me to tell you what I did, I'll be happy to.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, in the house we were living in, our closet doors were back to back. We had the same common wall, and I could hear, and you could hear through it. So what I did with my mom would help me time this and to find out how long it took. And my brother's bedroom, my bedroom was in the middle of the hallway. My brother's was at one end. My parents' bedroom was at the other end. So we had the timing down just perfectly. And then my mom would help me, okay, your breathing is showing, or you need to, make it look like you're asleep. So one night when I had it perfected, my mom said I had it perfected. I went into the closet and I went in there with, "Norman, I'm going to get you." And he came out and screaming. And by then I had learned how I could close the closet door just two, jumped in bed, got into the covers, and made it look like I had been sleeping. Oh, I still like that part of it.
Yeah. And he was real freaked out by that. Do you think that, are you sure that he wasn't having similar experiences and was just memory blocked and couldn't remember them?
He may have had experiences, because I remember back in 2012, we were both at our mom's house at the time, and he was drawing pictures of grays, every part of their head perfect, all from memory. And I looked at him and I said, "Can I have that?" He goes, "No, it's mine." I said, "Have you visited them? Have you seen their spaceship?" And he looked at me and he just started laughing, going, "You're crazy. You don't know what you're talking about." I said, "Norman, that's an extraterrestrial. It's an alien." Didn't say extraterrestrial. I said, "That's an alien." And he's like, what do you know? I said, and I was telling him, and they were of the Greys. I said, have you had an experience with them? And he just closed the sketch pad and said, go away and leave me alone.
Now, these beings would also do things which were kind of like practical jokes in a sense, didn't they? Or didn't they on one occasion move your bed out and got you in trouble with your parents, or they moved your bed away from where it would be normally?
They moved my bed each time. They kept moving it each time they visited.
Oh.
And I remember one night they were there. I said, don't move my bed or I'm going to get in trouble. And my mom's like, who are you talking to? And then they were gone. And I remember crying and going, I wish they would stop coming. And then one night my bedroom door was closed, and all of a sudden I heard my name, and my bedroom door was open. And it was the lady in white standing there in the doorway saying, they won't bother you anymore. And they never did. They were gone after that.
Okay, describe this lady in white. Did you think this was an extraterrestrial? Do you think this was a Nordic extraterrestrial, or do you think this was an angelic being? Or was she luminescent? Was she glowing?
She was white, and I would say she was probably, my dad was 5'8", so she was about 5'7", 5'8", and she was dressed in all white. I couldn't see any facial features, so she may have just been a being. And I could hear her talking telepathically to me, and she was luminescent. She was, her out.
She was emanating light.
Yeah.
Lit up the room.
No, just lit up her whole being. It
Uh-huh.
didn't light up my room. She was standing in the hallway, which was dark, but only she lit up. She wasn't lighting up the whole hallway at all.
And the white outfit she was wearing, was it a tight-fitting white suit, or was it what kind of attire was this?
It was like a flowing white dress. It was almost like, you've seen pictures of the Virgin Mary with the scarf over the head. It was similar. I could see like a white scarf. Yeah, over top of her head, but it may have been over her face. Maybe why I couldn't see it, I don't know. But I just know it was like long sleeves, and she just emanated, and it looked like she was wearing a flowing dress.
Almost like a wedding gown, maybe, or similar.
Possibly,
to
yeah.
And you couldn't see any details of the face, though. You couldn't see the hair or the eyes or anything.
No.
And that was a one-off experience. She came into the doorway, said that telepathically that they will no longer bother you anymore. And then you never saw her again, or you never saw her again. And then the experiences with those green creatures did cease at that point.
I haven't seen them since then, unless they were small reptilian, like it looked like a small, possibly reptilian, but I have seen regular reptilians.
Okay, we will get into those reptilian experiences in a little bit here. Just to finish up on the lady in white, you said that she emanated love. Did you feel like there was like she was a spiritually evolved being of some kind, or anything else you want to say about the lady in white before we move past this?
I just wish that she would have come back. I felt very peaceful with her. I felt safe, unlike the way I felt with my parents. And I would have liked for her to come back at night, just so I could, feel that love and that peace.
Okay, let's proceed to your next experiences, whichever you think are relevant here to talk about. I know you've had some hybrid program experiences with the Greys.
Mhm.
What were the next experiences, though? So those stopped. At what age was that those experiences stopped?
Probably the same age, 10 or 11, maybe. I don't know the time span. I just know that they stopped
Mhm.
until I was in my 20s
Mhm.
when I had when I was abducted onto a spaceship and impregnated.
Okay, so no experiences at all from that period until your 20s.
Correct. I know that my brother and I, well, Star Trek wasn't until like 5 years later, and we were in the backyard, and my dad had a heart attack, and he was at the time digging a swimming pool. So my brother and I, and because of his heart attack, he couldn't finish it. So my brother and I played in the hole in the yard. It had stairs,
Mhm.
and we would play. We're getting on the spaceship and going. And I remember my brother wanted to find his family because he didn't believe our parents were his parents. We shared the same mom, but at the time we did not know we did not share the same father. So he's half brother. And he knew that he didn't look like anyone and would always question it. And
Mhm.
my dad would even say, "You're my child." My dad's name was on his birth certificate because my parents, I found this out after my mom died and my dad had already been gone, that my mom was pregnant with my brother when she met my dad, and he was there. They had a relationship while, and she was married to another man. And so what happened was my dad was there when he was born, and he was going to take off, but my mom was asked my dad to marry him, and that was and they got married a year after, the following year after in 1955, but they put my dad's name on my brother's birth certificate as the father.
Mhm.
So there was
Mhm.
all that was related to his birth. But I remember I said, "Where are we going?" And he said, "We're going to go find my family." I said, "Well, let's go find mine too, because I want to get out of here." And he goes, "What do you mean your family?" I said, "This isn't my family." And he started laughing at me and said, "You're really crazy and stupid." And then my brother went into the house, and I really had put hopes into the swimming pool actually being a communication device to the Greys, because I am a Grey Starseed. And I remember my brother going in the house, and I stood there and I looked up at the sky and I said, "Can I come home now? I'm done being here. I just want to come home."
Interesting.
And
So, yes,
nothing happened.
yeah, so you did have some kind of inherent feeling and awareness that you didn't belong, that you were uh, not originating from Earth. Um, do you think that, how do you think you knew that at that point? Given, do you think there's more experiences in your childhood than you recall present day? But at that time, when you were at the bottom of the pool as a child, you had more awareness potentially of the reality of your life as a gray hybrid or soul, or like you say, or how do you think you knew, or just an intuition, or
No, I knew, because I remember when my soul was put into a stillborn baby. I'm a walk-in. And my mom gave birth to a
mm,
stillborn child after she had married what we'll
mhm,
call my dad,
mhm,
um, my human dad. And she had a stillborn baby, and the baby couldn't breathe for 5 minutes. And then I heard, I remember being aboard the spaceship and being called by my extraterrestrial name of Itka, and I remember being on the spaceship and them saying, "It's time," which meant I had to die a physical death, and then being in the holding room and waiting for a long time. And people say that they don't realize time, but I did. It was like, when am I going to go? When am I, I'm still here.
Holding room where? You talking about
In
in the
heaven.
hospital? Or you talk-
In heaven, the spiritual waiting room in heaven, where the spirits and souls wait to come to earth.
And you say you had to die a physical death there in order to be reborn as
Yes.
a human. That's an
Mhm.
interesting notion. Can you go into that a little bit further? What do you mean by you had to die there?
It's like reincarnation. You have to leave the shell that you're already in order for you to go into another shell.
Oh,
So,
so
and
you were already embodied somewhere else
as a gray extraterrestrial, yes.
as a gray.
And then I had to die in order to go to the holding room. And then I remember being in the delivery room and saw my mom, and I saw the doctor holding the baby, which they did upside down by their feet to spank them. That's how they did it in the 1950s and before, to get them to breathe. And I remember him holding the baby in his arms, and because the baby was blue from the arms, from the elbows down to the hands, and from the knees down to the feet, and lifeless. And my mom said, "One more time, please try one more time. I can't have a dead child." And he did, and I was in the baby. I remember it being in the living room and watching it happen.
Interesting. What else do you remember anything else from that prior time of incarnation, Earth incarnation as a gray? You remembered having to go through some kind of dying process in order to be reborn. Do you remember anything else about that period, about other grays or your family, or do you have any
I
other memories of that?
I grew up in what they have is the Greys. I remember growing up with other Greys in a big room where we would go to classes. I don't remember who my Grey mother was or her mate. And I remember going through classes, technology classes. I remember being trained in those on a spaceship. I also remember being in a long corridor where what we would say looked like computer screens, to where we could travel through them. It was like long tables. And I remember sitting there. I was in search and rescue. And I would go through there and come to Earth. A lot of my travels, I've noticed, was during the medieval times, and in England and the surrounding European, countries. And I would go and rescue any Greys who had been captured. And one couple of times, the Grey had expired, and I came back. Another time, a Grey was injured, and people were standing around the portal. And even though I was dressed in period time, the townspeople would know who was a stranger, and go after us. And there was a portal there for us to go through to get back to the ship. And a couple of times I couldn't get to the portal, and I said, "We need to come aboard. We can't get to the portal." And then we would be brought up onto the ship.
Very interesting. So you consider yourself a gray hybrid in the sense that you have a gray soul and a human body, and a hybrid in that sense, and you're sort of have a foot in both worlds in that sense? Or do you mean that your physical body is different in some kind of way? Because we have the hybrid program and the hybrids that are resulting from that program that are genetically altered, look different. Although there is some, what David Jacobs refers to as the hybrids, who don't really look different, but they are genetically different in some kind of way, cognitively different. In what sense do you consider yourself a hybrid?
It's interesting. Excuse me. I have a cousin on my father's mother's side of the family. We were talking, and we're related through her mother. We're seventh and eighth cousins. And we were talking on the phone, and she was explaining her experiences. So it's like, wow, we are related, and we believe she's a hybrid because she has technology information she never learned. It was all intuitive. And so we have it figured out, that we talked about it, and it's like, okay, I'm born into a hybrid family, and she was born before I was a few years. She's a couple of years older than I am. So we're figuring there have been hybrids along that family line, because I'm also genetically different in some areas, because my spine was curved backwards, and it was on x-rays, and I had to do exercises to have it turned back the way that it should. A physical therapist picked it up because I was having really bad back problems and pelvic area problems. Also, the way that I was formed, actually in high school, I found that there was massive tissue growth, and in my whole, what would we call uterus area, and gynecologist told my mom I cannot give her an exam. She has to have a DNC to have that all scraped and tissue cleaned out. So there was massive tissue. It was like completely blocked. And that's what I remember being different. And cognitively, I was able to levitate while I slept as a child. That's what I remember. I remember levitating in my sleep when my parents we would go to a friend's, and even at home, I would levitate, and I would hear my parents, and I would go back down onto the bed.
So levitating, but not at all related to any kind of abduction event, because, with an abductee, levitating off the bed, is typically the process of them, taking you into the craft, via the beam and whatnot. But this was just more of a psionic ability, latent ability that you possessed when you were a child.
Right.
And this was actually witnessed by your father, I think, at one point you've mentioned.
No, my levitation was witnessed when I was in my 30s, and I was at a dance, and my feet were not touching the floor. And somebody at the dance said, "Look," and was laying down, and a couple of guys were laying down, and said, "She's not touching the floor. How do you do that? She's levitating." And a couple of times, even at work, because we would have to wear heels to work, dress shoes and dress heels. And I would, one time I went down the hallway, I walked, and the assistant pathologist in the hospital, I went in the door and I said, "Hi, Jeff." He goes, "I didn't hear you coming down the hall." I said, I did. He goes, "I didn't hear you walking," because it wasn't carpeted floors. And then he watched me walk, and I had to be very careful and touch the ground and touch the floor when I walked. And at that point, I taught myself to no longer levitate.
Wow, that's interesting. So you were doing this unconsciously. You weren't even aware when you walked down the hallway to that person's office. You weren't even aware that you were levitating. And at the dance, you weren't aware of it either. So you weren't intentionally in any of these occurrences.
No. Well, I remember walking down the hallway saying, "I can't make noise." And I didn't make noise when I went down the hallway, but I was not consciously aware of it at the dance until people pointed it out.
Interesting. Yeah. Maybe later on, I don't want to get sidetracked in this right now. We might have some viewers potentially that might find this too hard to believe. This seems to defy gravity and the laws of nature, etc. But what do you think, real quick, what do you think is going on there as far as that ability? Does it tie into the fact that this isn't the 3D physical reality that we think it is? That the natural laws and things that we feel, constrict us aren't really as we think they are, but it's more of a kind of collective belief. And somehow this collective belief imposes these restrictions on us because we all believe it.
Mhm.
And that there are some people who, for whatever reason, maybe because they're connected with intelligences who don't share this belief, and that has kind of bled through into them in some fashion, that it's that belief. Or do you want to say anything about that before we move on to your experiences as far
Well,
as levitation?
there are people who can move boulders with their hands, the energy of their hands. There are people who can actually sit and levitate, but they say it comes from sound. Um, I didn't have to
Mm-hmm.
use sound in order to levitate. It was all thought. I have, you have also telekinesis where people can move, you can move the objects. I can make water boil without turning the water on, and it uses up quite a bit of my energy, so I don't do it anymore. But I would say if I was in a hurry, I would tell the water, you need to boil now. And within minutes of turning the burner on, medium, then it starts to boil. And also, this was witnessed when I was in my 20s, that I was married at the time, early 20s, and we had friends come down, Bruce and Jean Bourne, they came up actually from Virginia Beach area to where my husband and I were living in Kingsville, Maryland. And Jean said, oh, I turned on the cold water and I thought hot. And I was thinking hot water. And I didn't mean for it to be scalding. And she goes, Gloria, did you do that? So what? She goes, I apologized. And I said, I won't do it anymore. She said, no, it's okay. Just next time I'll ask you which one is the hot water. And my husband said it's the knob on in the kitchen. It was backwards. So I guess the warm water was on the right and the cold water was on the left. And after that, he mentioned it to his mom, and we had somebody come out and change the lines back to where hot was hot and cold was cold.
Mm-hmm.
It had been worked on, but it was hooked up wrong. But people can, if you believe you can do something and practice enough, you can do it.
Yeah. I think there's enough historical evidence to say that there's something here. If you really delve into this, Jeffrey Mishlove, his New Thinking Aloud podcast, in the last year, he's done some interviews with people who have really researched the subject. You'd be surprised, how much historical precedent there is for this, going back into antiquity of people levitating, of monks levitating, of priests, Catholic priests, uncontrollably levitating and having to be held down by the nuns, and, all kinds of experiences of people levitating. And we know that the ETs levitate themselves. Most of the time, they're never walking. When people see, the beings coming for them, more often than not, they're levitating. They're not walking bipedally, on the surface. They're floating. And they're physical and corporeal, but yet they're floating in our third dimensional reality, and they're doing it somehow, and it's possible somehow. And maybe we don't fully understand that, but it is possible. Okay, let's move on to the experiences when you're in your 20s, and you start to have experiences with, I guess, the small grays, but also tall grays or tall whites. I'm not sure. Let's go into this. Bring us there. The first experience, if you want to start at. How did it all start? Give us all of the detail. And go ahead and take it wherever you want.
I was 21. It was 1977. And I had been married that February. And this was probably months later because I lost my first pregnancy, was a human child. And I remember being pregnant the second time. And it was, even with birth control, I was extremely fertile to where I could get pregnant, even using birth control. And then I remember one night, the grays. I was up at the ceiling. It felt like I was up towards the ceiling, and there were grays all around me, and I was covered with a blanket. And that it might have been. I know that I had 3 children with them. So this happened, and I remember one time the pregnancy and the impregnation was done aboard a spaceship, and I was in a room with a metal table with a whole, with all windows, and that's where the tall whites were. But in the bedroom, it was the grays. But I remember the tall whites looked like they were wearing surgical gowns, and they were floating. They didn't walk. And I remember getting up off the table, and I said, "I'm getting out of here." And they had the doors locked and said, "Sit back down, or they'll basically put me down back on the table." So I did. And they said, "You're not going anywhere yet," because it's really weird to see everybody just stop and watch you. It was very intimidating. So I sat down and went, "Okay." And I remember years later being aboard the spaceship, and a gray took me there, and someone else, and had collected us and said, "I want you to know that this is where you were brought to be impregnated, get pregnant." And then I stood up and was watching, and then we got seen, and then we were each one of us was brought back to where we lived.
Okay, so let's unpack this in a little more detail. Okay, let's start out with the experiences in the bedroom. Okay, so these are the small grays, right, that you're seeing in the bedroom
Yes.
During these abduction events. They materialize in the room or come through the walls or somehow, and they're surrounding you. And then, do you remember at all the levitation through the physical matter of the house, the windows, the ceiling, or what have you? Do you remember do you have any memory of that? Or what do you remember about the experiences inside your house, in your bedroom? Do you remember the paralyzation, the numbness coming over your body, or what more detail do you remember about that period or those particular events?
I remember my husband at the time and I were asleep. And then I felt like then I woke up, and I remember being up towards the ceiling because I looked back down and he was still on the bed and he was asleep. But I could move my head to look down, but I couldn't move the rest of my body.
Mm-hmm.
And,
so you were paralyzed. And do you remember seeing on the ground in your room the small grays?
No, they were levitated with me.
They were levitating with you at that point already. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, and then when they bring you into the craft, you're no longer seeing the small grays at that point anymore. You're just seeing these, what you describe as tall whites.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Now, are these a gray being that is of white skin tone, or are these, because there's the tall whites that are described by, I'm trying to think of the contactee's name. I don't know if you've heard of him. He was maintaining some kind of weather technology near an Air Force base, and he would have contact with these tall whites that were human-like, but very, very tall, bald, but they did not have black wraparound eyes or anything like this. What did these tall whites look like? Were these like the grays, or were they more human-like, or describe?
They were tall, and they were white, and they looked like they had white clothes on, that like a white gown, and they looked like they had gloves instead of hands, gloves on, and it looked like they had a surgical mask on their face, and they floated, and it was like robotic in nature.
Now, did they have black wraparound eyes like the grays, or did they have more human-like? They had more human-like. So these were not, that's what I'm trying to get at. So these were, because some people have seen very tall grays that were whitish in skin tone. Actually, I think one of our previous guests, Camille James Harmon, the grays she encountered were very tall, but they had black wraparound eyes. So these weren't grays. They
No.
didn't have the type of morphology of the gray.
Mm-mm.
Would you say that this was a human-like morphology? Compare them to us.
They looked like they were wearing a surgical mask, so I didn't really get to see their face. It was like they were sterile, like we would see in a hospital room with the doctor wearing a mask and a cap and gloves, and they have their scrubs on, but they had white gowns, like long gowns, and not pants, but just covering. And they looked like they had the white hands, which looked like gloves to me. And then, like the masked face, there wasn't really any distinctive features in their face.
Mm-hmm. So it couldn't have been the humans. This couldn't have been anything SSP. You do think that these were extraterrestrial? They were discernibly extraterrestrial, or could they have potentially been humans? It's unusual for. I won't say it doesn't happen, but it's unusual for the ETs to be wearing medical protective gear.
Well, when a gray took me, I said, "This is where you were impregnated." So I don't know. With you saying that, Jim, I really don't know. I just know my experience.
But they were floating.
They were
And
floating.
that is one thing, which people in the SSP aren't typically seen to do, as far as I'm aware. Okay, so on one event, you're brought up with a gray, and then you arrive at a particular location on board the craft, and you're behind, you said, a partition. Some kind of partition or something.
Like a computer screen with a long hallway, a long room, actually.
And are you with the gray at this point when he says to you that we want you to remember or know
That was completely different. We were hiding behind something at the time for him showing. Yeah, we were at this time. We were hiding behind something, and where we weren't hidden from view of the.
Who? You and the gray, or you and another abductee?
Me and the gray and somebody else who was there. I don't know who it was.
Another abductee human.
Right, saying this is where you were impregnated, but stay down so they can't see you.
The gray told you that?
Yeah.
So the tall whites can't see you.
Right. It said you have to be quiet or they will know you are here. You can't stand up, you can't be in view, which I didn't listen. I stood up because I wanted to get closer. And that's when we were found out, and that's when the gray took us out and took us home.
So the gray, am I getting this right? The gray brought you on board this craft, where you didn't belong. You weren't, the tall whites who were operating the craft didn't intend for you to be there.
Right. But apparently the grays wanted me to remember this, to write about it, and for the other person to remember as well.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And do you have any memories at all of the implantation procedures of them, or any of the reproductive procedures? You don't remember any of the table procedures?
No, I don't remember any of those. I just remember what it felt like to be pregnant. And the last one, to actually go into labor and give birth.
Okay, so now, so were the pregnancies, were they typical phantom pregnancies where before you would show any, uh, girth abdominally, the fetus would be removed at that point, or how did these go for you as far as the pregnancies?
My first 2 pregnancies were taken before I started to show, but my last extraterrestrial pregnancy was 5 years in between. I was actually showing and 5 months pregnant.
Which is
And
atypical and unusual. Why do you think that one went differently? That's
because I had mentioned after losing the 3rd child, after the 3rd pregnancy, and saying, can I at least feel the baby when I want to be pregnant and feel the baby instead of losing it. And at that point, I was feeling the baby move. And of course, at 5 months, went into labor and gave full birth at home, actually at a friend's apartment, friend at the time, well, actually my dance partner at the time. And I gave birth in the toilet because my water was breaking.
at 5 months. Okay, now I remember you talking about this in another podcast, and this is a real bizarre experience. So you were on the toilet, your water broke, and you gave birth on the toilet,
Mm-hmm.
and you saw the
Yes.
fetus, and then it vanished somehow.
Oh yeah, just completely poof. Looked like a chicken. It was gray, and the big eyes.
It looked like a chicken.
I thought it did. It was the back where the neck was. It had ridges, almost like the hair would look like at the back.
Do you think this was part of like a hybrid program type of thing?
It may have been, Todd. It may have been, because I know that the baby was taken, vanished. And I know that at 5 months, it's full birth for a gray. So I was actually able to go to full birth.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. I was just curious if maybe a hybrid type of case is what we're talking about here.
It very well could be.
Well, it is, right? Because you later on come to have encounters with the grown-up hybrid children, and
Mhm.
you learn their names and all of this. Is that the best place to go to next from here, or what proceeded from these? How long of a period was this in which you had 3 pregnancies? Did these happen in quick succession during your early 20s, or
I had my first, actually 3 pregnancies. The first one was a human child. Then my next 2, they were within a span probably of 6 to 8 months. And then I didn't have my 3rd pregnancy until 5 years later.
Mm-hmm.
And actually they found, I think, like 10 pounds of fast-growing, slow-growing fibroids, actually tumors in my uterus. And I had to have an emergency. Actually, we had to wait to have my partial hysterectomy because of when my mom could come and take care of me. So, I mean, my uterus was coming out, and I would have to sit at work with my feet. I worked at a photomat booth, so I would have to have my feet up, and I would hemorrhage when I would have my monthly cycle. So that was when they took out, when the gynecologist he was a surgeon, went and put his hand underneath my uterus. He told me that he went to lift it up to cut it, and it was just one strand of tissue holding it attached to me. But the whole thing came up, and it was 10 pounds of tumors, and they were all benign.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Because they thought I had cancer, and I didn't. Thank God for that. I was in my mid-20s at that time.
Okay, so, and did you know what was happening? I mean, how did this impact you? Especially the case where you're on the toilet and you have your pregnancy early and then it vanishes. I mean, to me, that seems like an experience that could break you psychologically. You know, I mean, did you have any, or were you already kind of accustomed enough to the high strangeness of the ET experiences that you supposed that they had taken the baby at that point from the toilet, that it didn't just disappear and that it was taken, or how did you deal with that? Or
At the first, it was in shock. I was in shock
Mhm.
when it happened. And when the shock wore off, it was like I intuitively knew that, that they took the baby. It was like, I didn't talk about it. I went into denial that it happened for years. So I didn't really intuitively know. It was just a weird happening. And even when I went to the gynecologist to get checked out to make vaginally after I delivered the baby, we call it lost. And he said everything looked good, like I had never been pregnant. And he was with me he was my doctor through the entire pregnancy. And thinking that I was going to lose this one too, I was supposed to that was on a Friday, because a week later, he was going to put me in the hospital for bed rest for the remainder of my pregnancy. So they knew that it was time, the extraterrestrials. So it was time for me to go into labor instead of having my baby born in the hospital.
Mm-hmm. But does this not reflect imperfection on their part as far as, I mean, did the ETs really intend for that to go like that in the toilet? You know, it would seem like no, like they would have preferred the standard, procedure where they take it out of you on board the craft, or do you think that that was intended or not intended?
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm hearing that it was intended, but I really don't know. They knew what I was going to do and where I was. So
When you said you're hearing that it was intended, you're hearing right now
yeah.
psychically
Mm-hmm.
that it was intended.
Mm-hmm. Because I wanted to know what it was like to feel the baby, but also what was labor like. And I was able to experience labor. And that was my last one. That was my last child.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, let's move on to your experiences where you had interactions with these hybrid children, as abductees tend to have happen later on. If you remember, Todd, Karen Wilkinson later on came to meet her hybrid children. So what was the first experience you had with, I think some of these, you didn't even know, right, that they were your hybrid children. You had experiences where, I don't know if you want to start there, maybe, where you were home or somewhere, and you would get a knock on the door, which is really bizarre. I really want to understand this because, did the Greys sanction that, them coming down and almost playing a prank on you, or sort of...
I don't know. I remember being at home and I, like you said, I heard a knock on the door, but when I looked out the peephole, I didn't see anything. So I went back into the kitchen area, and then I heard, I think it was, don't remember if it was the same night now or the next day, probably maybe the next time. Or I opened the door up and then there were three little tiny beings. And I just looked at him like, what the heck is that? So I called the pastor's wife and she said, I know a woman who's a Wiccan. Here's her number, call her. And the woman said, that sounds like those are imps and, beings, and they're mischievous. And I thought, okay. Then, she said, this is what you do. But they also went to work with me. And I ended up getting fired from a temporary job because they were causing havoc in the office. So it was really bizarre. I mean, even I'm sitting at my desk facing this way, and this is before computers, and the electric typewriter was to my right. And there was a shelf above it with books. And the person who was who I was working for, had his office door open, and next thing you know, the books somewhere else went flying, and he just looked and came out and goes, "What was that?" Because he knew I didn't get up, and he thought I was doing it psychically. I said, "I didn't do anything." He went back into his office, and then the bookshelf came down and hit the electric typewriter. I went, "Oh my gosh." And he came in and said, "Just leave, and you're not coming back. I will fix it. I'll take care of it." So I lost a temporary job because of them, and it was at Johns.
How do you know it was them? Because these events, you didn't actually see them, right?
I did see them.
Oh, you did see them at the workplace?
Yes, I did see them, and we talked about
what
it
did
later.
they look like at this point? How small are they? What do these hybrids look like?
They're like a couple of feet tall, 2 to 3 feet tall.
Uh-huh.
And
like a gray, like a 2-foot tall gray,
yeah,
or
they were gray. Yes.
they were all gray.
Yep, they were all gray.
But yet the daughter, if I'm understanding correctly, develops in such a way that she doesn't quite resemble the typical gray as she gets older. But at this point, they look all gray, and you actually see them in the workplace, but nobody else sees them.
Right.
And so this is quite bizarre. Like, you would think that the adults on board the craft, that are responsible, for these hybrid children, would not in any way, shape, or form let something like that happen. But I wonder, having heard this experiences and other experiences, that they are given some kind of freedom and free reign to kind of do what they will to some extent. And they have a desire to interact with the mother. And this is, you hear this again and again, these hybrids have some kind of emotional attachment to the mother, which is interesting. Although it can vary, and I think in your case, there's some variance in terms of the emotional connection that your hybrid children have with you. Do you want to go into that a little bit? Or where's the next logical place to proceed from here?
Well, we can talk about that. When I was writing my book, My Journey as a Gray Hybrid, Shawnee, I'll get into their features in a few minutes. My firstborn, Pashenka, I remember seeing him telepathically. This is before he died.
An image was put in your mind.
Yes, and he was with the malevolent Greys. He inherited my mother's mental illness, and he was rebellious, and he thought that they all thought I had abandoned them, and he had a hard time understanding where's my mom. He had more of the human emotions, but his features were more human on his face than it was of a gray. But even though he had the gray eyes, the black, over the casing, but yet
he had a human mouth and a kind of human nose, and the other features were human-like. And so he didn't understand that you didn't abandon him, or you weren't even consciously aware, right, of his existence for...
I thought I had miscarriages. I didn't know they were my children. And when I was writing My Journey as a Gray Hybrid, it was when they told me it's time for you to write your book. Well, when I actually gave in to writing my book, I had seen my daughter Trevka and then my son Itkor, and I didn't know. I just knew I was aboard a spaceship, and I didn't know it was them until Malevka, my mate, said, "Would you like to meet the children?" And I said, at that point I was freaking out, and I said, "What do you mean children?" He goes, "They're alive." And I went into such anger and rage that how could you keep a mother from her children and her children from their mother? And it was all part of their training. And then they wouldn't talk about Pashenka. And then about 1 or 2 weeks, I don't remember the timing, before he passed, Trevka, my daughter, said, he wants to talk with you. I said, have him come, I would like to see him. And telepathically, I saw him on the spaceship, and they all asked questions. Why weren't you in our life? I said, I didn't even know you existed.
So they're not told. Interesting. You would think that they would have that knowledge, that at some point, one of the adult Greys would have informed them as to, what's going on here, as far as the situation, the human mother doesn't really know anything, I mean, her memory is being suppressed, so it seems like they're not telling them anything, but are they telling them some things, like the interactions that you had with these Greys, they do seem to possess some knowledge about you, don't they? Or they know that you're their mother, they know where to find you, they know where you live.
They
And
weren't told. I was looking at my book was published in 2023. So it was in 2022 that they knew that I was alive, and they wanted to know the truth about it. And it was hard on them at that point. And I told them the truth. This is, where it is. This is what I was told. And then Malevka, my mate said, then we're going to stop all communication. And I went to the Galactic Federation Council and I said, no, they're taking my rights away as a mom. How can they give me my children and then take them away? I said, I won't interfere with their work duties. And the council said, you have permission now to be in communication with your children. And that's how that came about. And then Pashenka he said, I don't know why I feel the way I do. I said, because my mother had a mental illness, and it causes rage and distorted thinking. And reality at times is not really reality, but she would rewrite her own reality in her mind as if that was real, and she would believe it. I said, that is what you inherited, which is also my brother had it, and it's a chemical imbalance in the brain.
That's interesting. I have not yet once thought of this, of the children of the hybrid children of an abductee possessing or finding themselves with the congenital diseases, psychological and whatnot, of the mother. But of course, that would be kind of something that would logically follow. Let's talk about Trevka, the female, and her appearance. And Todd, if you want to bring up, I don't know how many hybrid drawings we have, but I know we have a few, and I think they're in a separate folder. In the alien drawings folder, a separate folder that's called hybrids. And let's go into her appearance and talk about that.
She has hair, brown hair, that is parted on the side and comes down like what we would call a bob, the hairstyle of a bob. And
the brown in the same way that any human's hair is brown, just a kind of not an unusual brown or anything, just a kind of brunette hair.
Right, brunette hair.
And it's longer.
Yeah, it's about down to here, and it comes down to about middle of her neck. And
styled in any kind of way, totally unkempt or styled?
It's like it would be brushed, like a woman would brush her hair.
Like it was brushed, like it was taken care of. Most witnessings of hybrids, the abductees say that it doesn't seem like the child is well kept at all as far as their appearance and their hair. Their hair is always straggly and very unkempt looking. But there's so much variability with this, but that's interesting that her hair seemed brushed and well kept. Okay, now go on. Was the head proportionate with respect to her body, or
Yeah.
was it, because a lot of times when you see these hybrids in the fetal stage, the abductees always say, you know, it looked like a human fetus except for the head was disproportionately large. Was her head?
Hers is between mine and larger, and then she has the blue eyes, and she has the two dots for the nose and a very thin mouth like a gray would have.
So she does have the blue eyes. Yeah, a lot of times they have the blue eyes. Sometimes they have the black eyes. A lot of times, I think most of the time, though, their eyes are blue. Large blue eyes.
Yes, the shape of a gray. But I've heard people say that the black is because they have a protective casing over their eyes.
Yes, yes. Yeah, that may be the case. Hopefully we can bring up some drawings here. So the blue eyes, they're large and they're the shape of the gray's eyes. So teardrop shaped blue eyes with any kind of pupil or anything?
No,
Or
no pupil, none at all.
What do you think about this particular drawing?
It's similar to her hair, but her hair is shorter.
Are the eyes the size that you remember Trevka's, or bigger or smaller?
They're a
Or
little bit bigger above where the eyelid is. On this drawing, it was it was larger.
And what else about her features do you remember?
Todd, you know those pictures you initially showed us with the big gray eyes, with the grays with the large eyes? Yes, like the one on the far right of that picture, the one with the body at the angle with those. Yeah, that one right there.
Yeah.
That is similar to what her head and her eyes and her face looks like, but with hair.
That's strange to think of those big teardrop eyes being blue, a real sort of vivid blue. And did you say was there any pupil or anything in the
No
eyes,
pupil.
or were they sort of uniform?
They were all uniform. They were uniform, but they were the same blue that my mom's eyes were.
The same blue. Interesting.
And just for the record, I just want to put out that these plates that we're looking at with these grays on here, they are from David Chase, and he has a book that has a bunch of these different plates. But I wanted to definitely say his name is David Chase. So if anybody out there is interested, I know he has a book out there of grays and mantids and all that stuff. So
And what about the clothing that she wore? I've heard abductees say, you know, the clothing is rather drab and kind of not too fancy. Do you remember anything about
stands out. No, nothing stands out at all. It was almost like the same as her skin tone, the same color.
And what age, or what ages, I guess, did you see her, or at this point of her development when she's, you know, got the brown hair and the large eyes and so forth? What age do you reckon she was?
This was last year, and if she was born in 1977. We're looking at 2024.
Well, so how did this contact experience come about? Where did you see her? Were you taken into a craft, or did she
I
come
was taken
a
into a craft, and
could you walk us through that experience?
I was on the craft, and there were the panels behind her, and then there was also like a glass tablet sort of thing. And I asked, why am I here? And she said, well, you know this stuff. We're just giving you like a refresher, basically. We want to show you the changes. And I'm like, okay. And then she was just showing me things. And
the changes in
what the technology from when I was a gray to what they have now. And
So their technology is advancing.
always.
Not that it wouldn't, but you kind of never think about that. We kind of, at least I have been kind of thinking of their technology as being maybe in a static, perfected state, but
Their spacecraft is changing and evolving from, it always has. But the panels looked similar, but the way that it was run and operated was different than when I was a gray.
what can you say about that as far as the technology and how it's operated? Any useful insights that you've gained?
Everything is like with the hand, you just look and move it. You don't touch anything. Where we touched, when things were touched when I was on there, they were actually, she was putting her hand over the plate and everything, and some things were done telepathically for the functions on the ship.
Interesting. Yeah. So yeah, that's standard, the consciously controlled craft. And that's why in our reverse engineering procedures, we had to completely redesign everything or learn how to do that. I was just listening to someone talk about that recently. Okay, so in the time that we have left, let's go into some of the other contact experiences you've had with other beings. And we'll start out with the reptilians. And maybe, Todd, if you want to bring up some reptilian drawings whilst we talk about this. How did your contact come about with the reptilians?
They contacted me.
Telepathically at first, or how did this go?
I remember, actually, when I was in the secret space program, I was overseen by reptilians in the underground labs. But I've also seen what looked like a white albino reptilian. And then one day I was walking my dog and I just had a sense that someone was behind me, and there was a reptilian behind me, like the shadow silhouette of the reptilian. And I have come to learn that he is one of my guardian angels. He protects and watches over me.
Very similar to one of our past guests, Karen Wilkinson, who had, she referred to her reptilian as a kind of handler. And he would occasionally reach out to her telepathically. And when she sort of was able to get out of the program, this reptilian would communicate with her and try to tempt her into coming back. And so the albino reptilian experience, where were you? How did that come about again? We had another guest on who was a Freemason and was, during a ritual ceremony, witnessed an albino or a white-skinned reptilian manifest, or three of them manifest right in the main floor area.
Actually, it was just his face that I saw, and I don't remember what he said, but another time I did have a reptilian manifest in my bedroom. And look
Tell us
over.
about that. Tell us about that one experience. So you're in your bedroom. Is it night?
Yep, it's at night.
And then all of a sudden, what happens?
I heard my name and I was told, wake up, basically. And I woke up and I said, you need to leave. And they said, I don't remember what transpired, but I know that he was standing by my closet door that was closed, and my bedroom door, between my closet door and my bedroom door.
What did you see?
I saw his the outline of his body. It was dark, and I said, "Why? What are you here for?" And I don't remember if he said anything, but I said, you need to go. And I was scared. It's like, what's going on? Am I going to get eaten? What's going to happen? And I said, you need to leave. And he may have said, be careful or something, and left. And then my other experience was when I was walking my dog on the street in 2022. Yeah, it was 2022 because she passed in 2023.
Okay, and what happened in that experience? And were you able to see it better in this experience? So in the bedroom experience, it was too dark. You knew it was a reptilian.
Yes, because I could see his outline, because I have a nightlight on in my bathroom and a nightlight on in actually the light above my stove on. So it's still shining some kind of light around the area, not direct light, but what they would call it, probably an ambient light. And
what about the outline suggested a reptilian?
Muscular. He was muscular in the shape of his head, and the way that he stood, very stocky and muscular. And I would say looked like he was close to possibly 6 feet tall.
Did any of the pictures that we brought up on the screen resemble at all the reptilian that you saw, or did any of those seem accurate to you? Did they have a snout, or did the ones that you saw, did they have a snout at all? Sort of.
When I was in the Secret Space Program, they did. They had the reptilian-looking face, and they were very stocky. And they had, you'd see on the bottom of like an alligator. That was the front of what they looked like when I was in the Secret Space Programs. And this one, I couldn't really see what he looked like, just his outline. And then when I was outside, it was like he was in spirit form, and he was like manifested. Dark outline of him, and I was standing under the trees with my dog, and she was sniffing somewhere to go to the bathroom. And he was walking, and he just said, "Don't be afraid. It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you."
What do you think he was doing?
I've come to learn through being in a session with an evidential medium that he has passed already. He has died, and he has come back as my guardian angel. He was my handler in the Secret Space Program, but when I was on the spaceship, but not the spaceship, but the underground labs. So that's when I was in contact. I remember being in contact with him. But he's already passed and came and spoke through the medium and said that I'm her guardian angel and will watch over her. And I feel his energy in here. And it does feel reptilian in nature, but he's friendly.
Right now, you feel the energy in the room.
No, I do feel it when he is here.
Oh,
he comes and goes. He comes and goes.
It communicates telepathically?
Yeah. Yes.
What is some of the content of what he talks about? What would be relevant to speak about at this point? You're no longer being used, or are you?
We're talking about my life. I have questions. I ask him questions. He's a guardian angel. He has nothing to do with any programs. He's just in spirit form as a guardian angel. And I ask him questions, or we just have conversation when he's here, or you want to watch a movie. And I can and at times it's when I've had an especially upsetting day about something, or if I've been sick and I just don't feel good, and I ask him, can I feel you hold me? And I do. And I feel him physically holding me. Not for long, because it requires a lot of energy for him to do that. And there are other times I just feel him being in the room with me, sitting next to me. And I can feel him touch me, but when I reach out to him, I can't touch him. I don't feel his form, but I can feel him touching me. Never inappropriately. It's all like, putting his arm around me or putting his hand on top of mine.
Sort of like a comforting way.
Yes, very comforting.
So what's the situation as far as how many species are there? You know, you hear about the Alpha Draconis reptilians, and that they are almost always described as just revolting, smell bad or terrifying, exude really aggressive energy, you know, strike fear into your heart. Made Tony Rodriguez pee his pants. You know, you hear about these reptilians that are just palpably bad. You know, just very not moral in any way. Do you think that there's what do you think as far as the reptilians that are on planet Earth that are interacting with us on planet Earth? Are there a lot more than just one group, the Alpha Draconis group? The reptilian that you have interactions with, where does he come from? Has he ever enlightened you on that?
He's from the Dracos.
He is from the Dracos, but he's not. His constitution isn't like I just described in any way, or does he have the kind of warlike?
Not anymore in spirit form. No,
Mm-hmm.
he doesn't. When he was in my bedroom, he was huge and humongous, and it was frightening because I didn't know if he was friendly or if he wasn't friendly. And because I had heard nothing but the malevolence were around, but also all the species have both malevolent and benevolent. So now in spirit form, when he does materialize, it's that of I probably close to maybe 5'10" to 6 feet tall, but never, and it's just shadow form, like a really dark shadow, as black as behind what Todd, the black behind Todd, it's that like the black outline.
And so is the Alpha Draconis race not a monolith? Is it like the human race in that there are many different types of personalities and different character, moral and immoral, or what do you think about that? What do you think about everyone, or not everyone, but many people's experience of the reptilians as being sort of evil in nature?
Go back,
compared with
excuse
your
me, Todd. Go back one, please. That's what he looked similar in physically from the back.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Now, is that a kind of ridge that kind of goes down the center of the skull, down the back? Did he have?
I remember him having a ridge on the top of his head that went all the way back.
A ridge. So he identifies as an Alpha Draconis reptilian, and he's got a ridge. Do you know what kind of coloring or patterns does he have?
Now, before he had like, the front that looked like the body, like an alligator on his stomach. And that's all I saw.
An alligator in terms of the texture, the scales, or the color?
Yeah, the color, the ridges that go straight across. Yeah, like that one, the bottom middle one. That one right there, similar to that one with this, the head, and then the ridge is to the picture to my right on there with the face with that ridge that goes across the top. That's what similar to that.
Has he given you any information on his race? Has he told you anything about himself, personal details that would be interesting to the viewer?
He was attached to me. It's really weird because the evidential medium picked up on this, and she said that, and he even told her we were in a past life together. And at the time, and his name was Sebastian, that I remember. And I've had another medium pick up on it where I was, it was a teaching group, and I was what they call a sitter. And yeah, his eye looked like that too. No, the one before that one. And she said it was a mystery. You were in San Diego, California on the beach. I'm like, yeah. And I told her that the dune grass was there. And she said, but there's a mystery about him. Something happened. I said, he vanished. Come to find out, he was a time traveler. And then similar to that body with the texture around the bottom of it. I'm pointing it on my screen, like my finger, like you can see it, right? It's right there. But then he came back as a reptilian, and he watched over me in the programs to make sure that I didn't get hurt. And also similar to that face right there.
Yellow eyes, or what do you remember? Any coloring to the eyes? Or
I don't remember any coloring to the eyes because they all basically, there may have been a lighter yellow, or almost.
It seems like in all these drawings they've got yellow eyes.
Yeah, so they could have. It was a long time ago, and I wasn't able to really. We weren't supposed to look at them in the face.
Is this from the David Chase book, these drawings? Or where do we get all these drawings? Okay.
This is from David Chase's book.
Okay.
And these are just Gloria, these are perfect examples. You're giving us different features, and none of these might be the exact reptilian, but it's sparking your memory. And these are perfect for. I love this guy's book.
Yeah, it's lots of artwork.
Let me close out of that.
Okay, well, we're almost at 2 hours. How do we want to close this out here? What do you think is the most important message for the community, or a important message for the community that would be useful for people to know about? Something that you've learned from your own personal experience that you think other people need to know?
Well, there's some people who I've come across who have let the extraterrestrials know that they only want to work with a certain species. And one person was asking, why am I being visited by this and by that one? Because I've seen pictures. And I said, when you open yourself up to one species, you are actually opening yourself up to anyone who can come in. And there are many species that we don't know of. There can actually be billions that we are not aware of. So they're all going to look different. And I've seen pictures of species I haven't never seen before. She goes, well, what is it? I said, you need to communicate with that species and find out, what are they? Who are they? Why are they here? Why are they coming to you? But you've already opened up and said, I want to everyone to visit. I said, you're going to get benevolent and malevolent. So when you open up your life will never be the same again. And there are people who have been abducted. They haven't opened up their lives. But there are people who have not had the visitations. And I want people to know that the minute you open up, you're opening up a Pandora's box where you're going to have many experiences, both positive and negative. So just beware that when you say, okay, bring her on, I can handle it, you might find yourself not being able to emotionally, mentally handle it. You might think you are, but it's like was projecting, oh, I think I can handle that situation fine. This is what I will do. But when you're actually in the reality of the situation, your true nature is going to come out. And it's like, well, why did I do that? Because those are your reflexes. that is, you're going to come from a different experience. Are you afraid? Are you paralyzed? Is the situation completely different than what you thought it was going to be? And of course, probably is.
Mhm.
So you can't say how you will and won't act in any given situation until you're in it.
And they can potentially really take advantage of you in a quite serious way. Have
Oh
you
yeah,
seen? Yeah.
they do. I've had the Pleiades come and give me a healing session, and the next night I had the extraterrestrial Sasquatch take me aboard their craft. It's like Dave Emmons once said, it told me during an interview, he said, it's like when one species goes, the others get curious to see what is happening and what's going on, and they want to experience it too. What is all the interest about? So that's basically what's
Mhm.
happening.
Yeah, and you just always kind of hear that same story, with everybody who's had contact experiences. There's just a multitude of beings they encounter. It's almost never one race, and I always find that interesting. And is there anything that one can do if one is in this situation with any kind of entity or even non-physical entity to kind of get out of that contract, to use that term, or do you think that it's hopeless at that point?
It's hopeless at that point. They will use you as much or as little as they will for their purpose. And that's basically it. You just go with, yeah, it's basically going with the flow.
Okay, interesting. Well, Todd, do you have any final thoughts?
No, I am just, my brain is still trying to comprehend all this. Very interesting. Wonderful to have Gloria tell us this story of her personal encounters. It takes me a little to try to grasp everything, uh, because there's a lot of information. We could talk to you for hours and hours and hours.
We didn't even
And
get into the secret space program yet.
right.
On.
And with everything that you're describing, um, I've heard other instances from people that talk about bad grays and bad reptilians, and your story is not as, it's not as bad as what, I guess that's what I love about these different experiences, because each person's experience, the pages become, uh, how do I want to put it? It's not just about this bad experience or good experience. It's right in the middle, and that's where we're trying to get people. We're trying to get you right in the center, not judgmental of if this was a bad entity or a good entity, or but that experience is very important to me anyway. I want to hear that, good experiences, bad experiences, but your story seemed really good.
I've had some negative experiences. We didn't touch on those, like with the malevolent Sasquatch aboard the spaceship, and of course the little green men. But all in all, I've had a mixture. I remember even seeing swan-like beings, white, looking like they look like swans,
Like
and
avian like species.
but they were white, and they were like they looked like a swan, and they were very. It was very peaceful, and they were very beautiful. And I have not, the Pleiadians. I've even seen a Nordic, quite a few quite a few years ago here in where I live on the other side of the town. And one of the women there said, "Did you see that woman? Did you see?" I said, "Yeah," because the woman nodded to me, didn't talk. And she said, "That's a Nordic." And at the time where we were, she said, "Oh, the spacecrafts are back. They come and go." And she says, we exchanged phone numbers, and she would call and say, come see the spacecraft. And they were up in the air, and we could see them at night. And we'd see one way off at a distance, and then we would see some that were closer. But I said, what's up there? I said, what's up there besides the spacecraft? What is that flying to it? And she believed that it was the Air Force. So I don't know if it was the Air Force doing maneuvers, trying to get close to them, or if they had their own crafts up there and doing maneuvers to see how they react with it. But the one spacecraft that was around disk was off to the side watching.
Gloria, do you see any craft nowadays? Do you see anything? I was just curious if you if they are still watching, communicating with you.
Right now, I'm not as open in communicating with them. Sometimes I will go to my bedroom window and open it up because it's looking out to northern part of the city. And now that the heat is not prevalent and the mosquitoes aren't, I could go out onto the patio where I would see them at night and take pictures and stuff like that. And they would be there. But when my dog was alive and I would walk her every couple of hours, and even at dark, when it was really dark out in the morning or at night, they were up in the sky. One of the former neighbors said, what are those three things up there in the sky? Those aren't stars. I said, that's spacecraft. And another time we were out on the back patio, and I had requested for the spaceships to be there, the craft, and it's a smoking patio, so we're out there so she could smoke. She said, that thing is moving. It's not. I said, that is another spacecraft. So I can do spacecraft calling and let them know that I would like to see them. But I don't as much because I'm not writing a book about it. But there are times where I will open up the blinds on my window, and I'll look out, and then I'll see a flicker with a light, and then they would stay on and went, hi, how are you?
Right. And you've had in your books, you explain about different markings that you've had over time.
Yeah, it's in this book. And I even have pictures of the markings and the scratches.
And I put your links in the description down below.
That's that thick a book, and those were just your experiences during 2022 and 2023.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And I even have some metaphysical encounters as well. Yeah. I talk about in 2021 my experience with looking for my working with someone to find a missing person in Idaho, and talk about my the little green men at the beginning, like on page 11, and talk about the horse in here.
And
so
this is a sequel, correct?
That's this one, Extraterrestrial, Metaphysical, Paranormal, and Visionary Encounters, is a sequel to my journey as a gray hybrid.
Okay.
I do overlap some of the information, so in case people don't get, this book and only, pick up this one. And this one is a lot thicker.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to share that real quick.
Mm-hmm.
So this is at Amazon. I put all the links below in the comments where you can get all her books. But yes, this one, pictures. Is there pictures in the other book?
No, in Journey of the Hybrid. No, just this one.
Okay.
And also there's a conversation. Yeah, because on page 24, I have, pictures with some stuff in there. And even the squiggly mark, you could see by the arrow, that was the picture I took of the spacecraft as it moved.
Oh, wow.
Hmm.
Yes, interesting. Very interesting. So yes, anybody out there that definitely would like to check out your books, please go to Amazon, type in Gloria Hass, and her books will pop right up. Yes. Okay. I wanted to make sure because I just did it here. So yes, pops right up. Are these? I was just looking. Are these available on Kindle too?
Yeah, Kindle Unlimited,
Okay.
as well as Kindle and paperback.
Okay. Perfect. All right. Well, Gloria, thank you so much for giving us 2 hours of your time. It's incredible experiences that you've had. And I would definitely love to have you back on to continue with this and the secret space program, talk about some of your other experiences that you've had. Looks like you've had metaphysical, paranormal. I mean, that's right up our alley as well. So we would love to have you back on to talk about all these other things.
I'd love to come back, and let's check our calendars and schedule a time after the show is over and see what you have up and available, because I have, my own podcast, but I'm scheduling the time with that differently than I did now to make it me more accessible to be on other people's podcasts.
Yeah. Fantastic. And Jim, anything else?
No, we'll just save it for the next podcast.
All right. Sounds good. All right. Thank you, Gloria. I want to thank all you for watching, listening, and joining in. And we hope you enjoyed this episode of Paranomaly Podcast. And we will see you on the next episode. All right. Take care, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you for tuning in with us tonight. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and follow to receive notifications when new content is made available. A Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure is looking to talk with ufologists, researchers, investigators, contactees, abductees, channelers, and more for upcoming shows. Or if you have stories, photos, videos, questions, suggestions, or comments, please contact us through Messenger or email us at paranomalypodcast@gmail.com. And you can also visit us at paranomalypodcast.com for more content and information, including all our social links. I thank you again for watching or listening, and we hope to see you on the next episode of Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure.